Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock and we make a start. And can I just, first of all, welcome members of the public watching virtually and welcome to this meeting of the Strategic and Technical Planning Committee being held today, Friday, the 4th of November, 2022. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of this committee, and my Vice Chairman is Councillor John Worth. The meeting is being live streamed and the recording will also be available to view on the website after the meeting. Can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, can you please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen? We have one application to determine this afternoon, and the case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. Then I'll invite members of the public who have registered to speak to address the committee. Each speaker has 3 minutes, following which the committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officer before moving on to their debate. Just for a bit of housekeeping, I want to introduce the officers involved in today's meeting. On my right here is Phil Crowther, our solicitor. We've got Mike Garrity's just appeared, just come in. Welcome, Mike. Mike Garrity is Head of Planning. Anna Lee is the Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement. Anne Collins, the Development Management Area Manager in the Southwest. Sarah Barber, Senior Landscape Architect. Elaine Tibble, Senior Democratic Services Officer. And Joshua Kennedy, who's an Apprentice Democratic Services Officer. So welcome to all of you as well. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies, please, Elaine.
Thank you. We just have one apology from Councillor David Took.
Fine, thank you very much. Item 2 is to agree and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of October 2022. Are members happy that I sign these as a true record of the meeting?
Happy, yes.
All agreed? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any member, any interest to declare on the item on the agenda today? If there is anything that crops up during the debate, I hope you'll make it clear to us anyway. Thank you. Item 4 is public participation. That is documented quite well on the agenda that the public are allowed 3 minutes each to speak, but they have to register, in this case, by Wednesday morning, 8:30. We have speakers registered and they will be asked to speak either now or after the presentation. Can I ask you, what would you prefer to do? You can either make your presentation now at this stage or wait until the officers made the presentation and then say your piece. Take that, you're happy to wait till afterwards. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we move on to the one substantive item, which is the planning application. That's item 5, and that's application number P/FUL/2021/01920. And it's land at Cruxton Farm, Cruxton Lane, Cruxton, and it's to install ground-mounted solar panel photovoltaic solar arrays, substations, inverter stations, security fencing, access tracks, landscaping, and other ancillary infrastructure. The presentation today is going to be made by Anne Collins because Emma Telford, who was the officer dealing with this, is unfortunately not well. So Anne's going to do this, and I'm sure she'll do a very good job for us. She's had to stand in at the last minute, but I know she's very, very familiar with the site and the detail. So Anne, when you're ready, if you'd like to start your presentation and take your time, make sure you're happy with what you're presenting for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application, as the Chairman has outlined, is for a solar farm. It relates to 17.66 hectares of land and the proposals for a solar farm that would generate approximately 11.8 megawatts of electricity sufficient to power approximately 4,781 homes. Let me just change my cursor a minute so you can clearly see that. So we've got the main road here going to Maiden Newton, the settlement of Cruxton at the top of the plan here. This part of the red line here shows a access from Cruxton up to the application site, and the actual application site itself is these two fields outlined in red here. The proposal is that this access would be for small construction vehicles and the construction workers during the construction period. But once operational, it would be it would be the only access to the site for a sort of once a fortnight maintenance visit. The red line was amended during the course of the application to move the main construction access to this route down here, going back to Greenford Lane. And this is where it's proposed that the sort of heavy vehicles and the sort of primary route for the construction phase would be. The construction phase is anticipated to be about 3.5 to 4 months. This is just an aerial photo, so it shows you the hamlet of Cruxton down here. Here's the Dorchester Road from Frampton through to Maiden Newton. That access up, and these two fields are the subject of the application. Site plan here, so up to the north off the map here is Cruxton. This is the access road up. This is also where the cable route that would go down. I've got another plan later on the presentation to connect back to the 33 kilovolt grid line that exists to the north of the site currently. And the two fields are in question in here. This shows how the photo arrays would be arranged. Maximum height of the photo arrays is 2.54 metres, spaced 5.6 metres between the rows, and there's various little structures such as the substation and inverter buildings, etc., around the site, and I'll show you further details of those in a minute. Just a bit more on the access route. So during the course of the application, there was no objection from Highways to the original proposal to bring all access in via Cruxton. However, there was quite a lot of third-party concern about it. So the applicant amended the scheme, and also there was further consultation with National Highways because there had been some concerns about access from the A35. So it's now proposed that any traffic coming along the A35 from the west would leave the A35 at this junction here at Kingston Russell and travel up Greenford Lane to come into the site. Traffic from the west along the A35 would leave at the Roman Road junction, travel along, and then again go up Greenford Lane. To depart from the site, traffic would come down Greenford Lane and out the Roman Road junction where there's better visibility. This has all been agreed with National Highways and would be the subject of a condition if the application were to be approved. Here's details. This shows you these rows of panels. As I said, the maximum height's about 2.54 metres, obviously orientated to get the maximum solar gain, standard looking solar panels that we've all seen on other sites. Details of the inverter station, and the whole site would have a deer-proof security fence around it, 2.2 metres high, kind of wire fence, and obviously the colour of it could be conditioned. Then there'll be some other structures on site, again, a typical kind of substation building, 3.45 metres height, so all single storey in scale, and a customer switchgear and T-boot enclosures, again, of a similar kind of scale, slightly shorter, 3 metres in height. And the transformer as well. So typical structures you expect to see ancillary to a solar farm. This again just shows you where they're supposed to go. So when the main operational access, you'd have the substation down here, switchgear, and then 3 of these switch transformer structures around the site. The blue line running all the way around the site here, that's where the security fence would be going. This is just show you the connection point. So this is Cruxton here. The connection point will run down from that existing access track and come and join the existing grid line along here. So the connection point is between Cruxton and the solar farm. Just to give you a bit of context, obviously Cruxton is with the AONB. That's a key point. That's the reason for the refusal as outlined in the report. And this just gives you a bit of context in terms of other solar farms already within the A&B within relative proximity to the site. There's an existing solar farm up at Warden Hill off the A37, and there's also one at Rampisham Down in the A&B, both sites within a matter with less than 10 miles of the site, just to give you a bit of a flavour of that wider context. The officer's report makes reference to a number of heritage assets within the vicinity of the site. So the application site is these two fields with the red star in here, and the nearest listed buildings are in the hamlet of Cruxton. And the Schedule H monuments are the two bowl barrows here to the west of the site, to the east of the site. However, it's important to note, as detailed in the officer's report, that due to topography and distance, intervening vegetation, etc., it is considered by officers that there would be no harm to the setting of these assets, these heritage assets, from the proposed solar farm. The nearest residential properties, again, the application site outlined with the red stars here. Here's Cruxton, so obviously you've got a number of dwellings down in Cruxton, Notting Hill Barn cottages up there, and the farm buildings and farmhouse at Greenford Lane over here. Again, as set out in the report, due to distances, topography and vegetation, despite there being some potential for glint and glare, it would have no significant impact. There's no significant issue with noise, etc. So, but it's just to give you the context of where they sit as they're referred to in the report. Obviously, the key issue being here, the A&B, and there's numerous rights of way either going through the site or with the vicinity of the site. The really key consideration has been for officers the Macmillan Way. The Macmillan Way is a long distance route. It actually runs from Lincolnshire to Abbotsbury in Dorset, over 200 miles in length. I think it was believed originally to be related to Macmillan Way, the charity, hence its name. So it's a long distance route enjoyed by many, and it actually runs through the site along this edge and then turns the corner to run along the top corner of the site. Other rights of way within the site, and I've labelled them as referred to in the report, and here's also the A37 up in the top right-hand corner. Just for the context of those in the room and watching this online, we did have a member site visit via video and actually went out on site this morning, and members and officers viewed the site from a hog cliff up here on the A37 and a lay-by, and we were shown videos taken from within the site, just showing the context. This is where we parked this morning up on the A37 to get the view back across, and this is the open access land of Hog Cliff Nature Reserve, and there's the application site starred in red. Some photos from within the application site itself. So this is stood in the bottom corner of Field 1. We're looking up the site towards the boundary with Field 2. This track up here, this sort of muddy area leading up, this is actually the Macmillan Way, the right-of-way that runs through the site. This is stood on the Macmillan Way, and we've kind of turned through 90 degrees to look out across the site. So as you can see, just at the moment, an undeveloped agricultural field. We're now stood going towards the top of Field 1, looking back across, and we're looking back across to that ridge where the A37 is, where we viewed the site from this morning. This is the existing hedgerow to the side, which the Macmillan Way runs up and along. This is now stood in the bottom corner of Field 2, looking up to the very top of the application site, Macmillan Way running up this boundary here. Just stood further up the field. And then this is stood in the very top corner, again, looking back out across the valley. So we're looking down with the boundary of the bottom field, and this is where the Macmillan Way turns and follows the field boundary around the corner, along this. And this is the very top edge of the site, where there's an existing gap in the hedgerow there, where the temporary construction access would come in to access the fields. And this basically shows that view that we saw this morning up from Hog Cliff, looking back towards the site in the distance. Key planning issues. So, I mean, this is all detailed in the report, but principle of development. The heritage assets, also explained, we've accepted that there is no adverse impact on heritage assets, and same in respect of residential amenity. A key issue really, the crux of the matter really is the impact on the AONB and the visual amenity of the area. That's the AONB in terms of wider views and its landscape character. It's also the enjoyment of the AONB from Macmillan Way. And we can consider the impact on the development of the Macmillan Way. While the footpath wouldn't be directly affected, i.e. blocked or need to be diverted in any way, users of rights of way do have the right to amenity and the enjoyment and appreciation of those rights of ways and the surroundings within which they are. So it was the AONB which is the key issue. The report sets out comprehensively the importance and great weight which is given to the protection of the AONB, particularly having regard to policy ENV1 of the adopted local plan, and paragraph 177 of the MPPF and the tests for major development in the AONB. I just want to outline here that the tests for major development in the AONB, major development for the purposes of the MPPF is a little different to what we have as a statutory major definition. This is a major application for that statutory definition, but officers are also considered this to be major development for the tests at paragraph 177 of the MPPF, given the scale and nature of the development. And again, that's all set out in the officer's report. Highway safety, no objection from Dorset Council highway officers, and there's now no objection subject to conditions from National Highways England. Biodiversity, the applicant has submitted an amended landscape and ecology mitigation plan. That would need to be the subject of a condition if approved, but essentially there would be some small biodiversity net gains from the development of the site. There's additional hedgerow and wildflower planting proposed, bat and bird boxes, etc. And that's all I set out in the landscape and ecology mitigation plan. And then finally, the last consideration really is that right of way. And as I've said out, whilst not obstructed, there is the consideration of the impact on amenity. I'm just going to go back to visual amenity. I think I had a question earlier about the height of the hedgerow on the side. So if I just take us back a moment to the pictures, bear with me a moment. So there's an existing hedgerow running through the site that we could see from that viewpoint earlier. There's a little additional bit of hedgerow planting to extend that, but that gap is not completely filled. It's proposed that that hedgerow would be maintained at about a height of 3 metres, so it would be retained within the development site. A key point to note is that a new hedgerow would be planted along this boundary here, effectively creating a tunnel effect from the Macmillan Way. There's an existing hedgerow on this boundary, which is sort of somewhat overgrown with trees and etc. And then a new hedgerow would be planted to the opposite side of the path to that. And it will obviously take a period of time to grow up, but it's proposed that once at full height, it be maintained at a maximum height of about 2.5 metres. Chair, the recommendation is for refusal due to the impacts on the character and appearance of the AONB, having regard to the very undeveloped and open character of this downland location and the impacts on the amenity from the right-of-way. It's considered that development fails to meet the tests for major development in the AONB set out in paragraph 177, conflicts with our local plan policies and C1A of the Dorset AONB management plan, and as such, the recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that. Got 3 public speakers on this one, and possibly Ward Councillor Alford, but I don't see he's here yet. But the first speaker on my list is Guy Dickinson from the West Dorset Campaign Protection of Rural England. Guy, when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes, and just press the little speaker thing on your microphone when you're ready to start. Okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Guy Dickinson, and I'm speaking in opposition to this application on behalf of Dorset CPRE. It has all been said many times before, but the most important reason to oppose this application is simply that it is in the area of outstanding natural beauty. Sorry. To give an area of A and B status is to give it the highest level of protection available alongside national parks. The National Planning Policy Framework states that great weight should be given to the conserving of landscape and scenic beauty, and that AONBs have the highest status of protection in relation to landscape and scenic beauty. In addition, the local plan, ENV1, states any development in the AONB must conserve, enhance or restore an area, as also repeated in the NPPF. This solar park certainly does not do that. I appreciate that at this time there is a great need for more generation of renewable energy, but there are many other far more appropriate places to put solar panels, particularly roofs. All new builds should have panels on their roofs now, but it seems this is not the case in recent large developments that have been given planning permission. There are also many alternative potential roof sites for panels. It is also worth mentioning that this country's ability to feed itself has become critical, so covering of agricultural land in solar panels does not seem wise. However, the overriding reason to oppose this is its position in the area of outstanding natural beauty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I've got Richard Brown, who's the Landscape Planning Officer for the Dorset AONB team. Richard, happy when you're ready?
Good afternoon. The AONB team have been aware of this proposal from the pre-application stage, and we've consistently commented that the site is unsuitable for a large-scale solar farm. In fact, I was quite familiar with the site prior to hearing about the solar farm, having previously used a nearby location along the Macmillan Way for a photographic monitoring project. The location was selected precisely because of the fine panoramic views which were achieved and the intervisibility with the opposite slopes of the Froome Valley. The key difficulties in accepting this proposal arise from its elevated and isolated position amongst the downs, the fact that the promoted Macmillan Trail runs directly alongside the site, and the clear visibility of the site from locations on the other side of the valley, including Hogcliffe National Nature Reserve and a range of footpaths above Maiden Newton. The development would be clearly discernible in these views. It would be seen as an isolated and discordant man-made element within the attractive upland landscape. Consequently, the application would significantly impact upon some of the AONB's special qualities, particularly uninterrupted panoramic views, tranquility and remoteness, and undeveloped rural character. The AONB team is not fundamentally opposed to solar farms. We have accepted other applications in the AONB and its setting, including major proposals. Notably, such cases involve relatively localised impacts, effective mitigation, and greater levels of landscape enhancements. The AONB team is also currently engaged in a high number of consultations for solar farms, particularly within the setting. In these areas outside the AONB, the exceptional circumstances test does not apply, although good siting and substantial planting or other enhancements are often needed. As is explained within the officer's report, there are not compelling reasons for this proposal to be located in such a sensitive position within the AONB. I would support the analysis of the case officer that there are not exceptional considerations that justify accepting significant harm to the landscape in this case. In reaching this conclusion, the case officer has had regard to advice from key consultees, including the Council's Landscape Officer, Natural England and the AONB team, who have all objected to the proposal. Overall, the application substantially conflicts with protective policies in the National Planning Policy Framework, the local plan and the AONB management plan. Given this, the AONB team feel that it is our only option to respectfully invite the committee to accept the recommendation that is provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next speaker is Mark Harding, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant, who's in Enviramina. Have I got that right? Yeah. When you're ready, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to speak as the applicant in support of the proposed development. Enviramina are a renewable energy company headquartered in Reading who prioritise safe working conditions, care for the environment and have a clear commitment to leave places we touch in a better condition than when we arrived. We also have a strong focus on creating opportunities for local people and will look to utilise local resource where possible throughout the project life. During the consideration of the planning application, we have worked hard to address all of the concerns raised by consultees and interested parties. You will note from the committee report that apart from landscape officers, all of the other consultees are satisfied with the proposals and there are minimal objections from local residents. This includes Maiden Newton Parish Council, who have worked with at length throughout the planning process, and they have repeatedly provided their full support for the project. Given this, it can be said that the solar farm has the support of the local community. Looking at the bigger picture, members be well aware of the climate emergency and energy crisis we are currently experiencing, and that we all need to play a part in addressing this by reducing the demand for fossil fuels to reduce emissions and limit energy bills. The proposed development will make an important contribution towards achieving a fully decarbonised power sector by 2035 and helping the UK to secure energy independence and be self-sufficient in the long term. Furthermore, the Council's own climate and ecological emergency strategy states that the Council needs to be proactive in increasing renewable energy deployment and accelerating its growth. It is our view that the visual impact of the development is acceptable, and this has been carefully assessed as part of preparing the planning application. Any harm is far outweighed by the public benefits of the development in both the local and national interest. Enviramina and its consultants have undertaken several visits to the site and nearby perceived viewpoints, and on a number of occasions has needed to revisit due to views of the site not being clear-cut, further supporting our argument. Our landscape plans for the site integrate planting along the Macmillan Way, and we will ensure that this route is well maintained for users. It is clear this route has been neglected in recent times and is currently overgrown, and footpath signs are damaged, meaning users often use the landowner's land by mistake. The land will be capable of being used for grazing of sheep during its lifetime, so there can be a continued agricultural use of the site, and biodiversity enhancements that the development will bring will live long after the site has been decommissioned, representing a lasting benefit of the area. In conclusion, the Enviramina solar farm proposals at Cruxton will generate significant benefits by providing safe, reliable, renewable energy and meets the criteria for development in the AONB. We therefore respectfully request that members of the committee overturn the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. I had Councillor Tony Orford down as a speaker, but I'm told he can't make it anyway. So that's the end of our public speaking session. Can I go back to officers? Is there any comments you want to pick up on what you've heard from our speakers, first of all, before I go to the committee?
Chair, I just wanted to, I realised my presentation I showed you didn't have the photo montage in showing of the planting adjacent to Macmillan Way, which was something the applicant's spoken about. I've just found the relevant slide. So if I can just share that with members, they might find that helpful just to see. So this is the site as existing. I think we're in field 1 here, the lower of the 2 fields, looking up the site on the Macmillan Way. And I talked about, but it was hard to see from the site plan, the fact that we've got this existing planting on the right-hand side of the photo, which is sort of unmaintained at the moment, of sort of some straggly nature, but quite significant height. And then this photo at the bottom of the screen shows sort of year 1, that new hedgerow being planted between the Macmillan Way and the solar panels. And it's that hedgerow that over time would grow up, and the applicant is proposing to maintain at a height of 2.5 metres. So I just wanted to offer that by way of information. And one other point, not related to what the speaker said, but point of housekeeping, I've just realised that the recommendation at the very end of the report has been a typo, and references has been omitted to one of the local plan policies. Section 1 of the report does include the relevant local plan policy, but where the recommendation at the end of the report doesn't. So we just need to add in policy EMV10, proposal being contrary to it, as per the recommendations set out in section 1 of the report, because it's a typo in the final section. But other than that, Chair, I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for showing those images of the projected growth as well. That is helpful. Obviously, members earlier today have had the chance. We had a site visit, we had a video and photographic presentation and an explanation. So we have been made very familiar in addition to what we've had presented here today. So I think we've all had a good taster of what's involved. Before I open up to debate, I'm just going to go around to members, as is my wont, and find out if they have any questions relating to the presentation. I don't want to really get involved in debate at this stage. I'll just go around and ask the members in turn if they have any questions relating to what they've seen presented so far. Maybe they want a little bit more clarification. So, in no particular order, but we'll start with Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you.
You just happen to be on the left, Shane, there, so, and I'm left-handed. So.
Thank you, Chairman. Felt very much like East Dorset Planning Committee then. Yeah, just one quick one. On page 13, it talks about Millennium Way, and I presume that's Millennium Way. It was just a typo in the report, I'm guessing. I haven't got that wrong. That there was a different path with a different name.
Yes, Chair. I think that was, you got a case officer summarising the third parties, and the third parties obviously referred to it as Millennium Way, but there isn't one as far as I'm aware called Millennium Way. I think it's a reference to Millennium Way, as the councillor says.
Councillor Dyer?
Nothing at this point in time, Chair.
Councillor Penfold? So again, my mic was on, of course, yes.
No questions at this present time, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. We all heard you that time, Mary. Thank you. My apologies. Councillor Rideout.
No questions at this time. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Jesperson.
No questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think I asked all the actual technical questions this morning. Thank you.
Councillor Barrow. Bolwell. It's these new specs. I'm sorry, I can't get used to them.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Dunseith.
No questions, Chairman.
Brenton.
I've just questions about the cabling and the wiring going from proposed solar farm to the mains, to the pylons. Is that all sorted out? How high is it, how intrusive is this going to be? Not just in, well, mostly in construction.
I think, does that relate directly to the presentation? Would you just like to see possibly the slide again where the cabling comes into the site? Is that possible? Can we find that one, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll just find that for you. Just bear with me a moment. So, Chair, I don't have details in front of me. I'm assuming that most of these cablings for these solar farms go underground from the solar farm to the point where they'll obviously come up to ground and connect back up to the existing grid line. I'm assuming that's the case here. However, it is something that could be conditioned were the scheme to be approved, just to ensure that it's done for the very reasons you say in a sympathetic manner, and if it's going below ground, that the ground is then restored once it's underground, replanted, whatever that may be, or if it's going above ground, it's an appropriate, well, it will have to be appropriate height for the practicalities of it, but it's acceptable. So that is a matter that could be conditioned.
Happy with that? Good, thank you. And Councillor Worth. Right, okay. Open it up to members. Who's going to be first on this one then? Councillor Pem.
Yes, it's a comment and a question, Chairman, really. The applicant states that this will reduce our energy bills, but I query the cost of this to our precious Dorset landscape.
Yeah, okay. Is there a question there?
It's really a question and a comment. I just noted the comment, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you very much. Okay. Who's next? Councillor Rideout.
Belinda Rideout, Gillingham Ward. Thank you, Chairman. Well, obviously, I've read the report and I went on the site visit this morning, and I can clearly see that this proposal will have a huge impact on the landscape character, a very sensitive character area. If it were outside the AONB, it could be just about acceptable, but as it's in the AONB, it is not acceptable, and it doesn't meet the exceptions test. It's on an elevated position, so it can be seen for miles and miles around. And also, I have a big concern with the Macmillan Way. It's going to, for nearly 3/4 of a mile, tunnel in with the new hedge along the Macmillan Way, and I find that unacceptable because of the character. It should be lovely open character. So in my view, I don't think any benefit that this brings outweighs the harm that it will do to the OMB. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. Councillor Jespersen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have to very much support what's been said here. It goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, that Dorset Council and all of us are very much in favour of solar arrays. That's a given. We are almost beyond the point when we have to remind people of that. It's absolutely crucial that Dorset and indeed the country finds sustainable and sources of energy and quickly. So that's absolutely understood. The question that concerns us today is whether this is the right location for such a solar array. And in my view, I would have to support the officer's very well considered and well made case that actually this is not the right location. And there's two things that concern me most. First, as have already been made, the impact of this, the location of this array and the fence and the planting that is planned on the Macmillan Way. This development will result in the best part of a mile of this very, very important nationally significant walk, which is currently an open vista, being replaced by a tunnel where you will have no views in either direction. That is quite a severe loss of the visual amenity of this, as I say, very important public right-of-way. And it's difficult to see that level of loss is justified. So that's my first concern. It's the impact on the Macmillan Way. And then there's the principle of the location. This development fails to meet the test for a development in the AONB in that there's no evidence offered for why the installation needs to be here as opposed to elsewhere. There are acres and acres, thousands of acres of open space in Dorset where we can comfortably put a solar farm. So that there would have to be a very compelling reason why it would be here in this particular space in the AONB. And that compelling case has not been made. I mean, just to say, I'm not even arguing that we couldn't have a solar farm in an AONB. There are 2 other solar farms nearby in this very AONB that have been much more sensitively located. They're on the ridge, and so they're not visible from widely. We couldn't see them this morning on our site visit. So it's perfectly possible to put solar farms in the AONB in a sensitive way, which again, so I don't buy the argument that it has to be here. It doesn't. It could be elsewhere. It could even be elsewhere in the AONB and be acceptable in planning terms. So I do not support the view that the benefits outweigh the harm. I think the harm to the AONB and to the Macmillan Way is substantial and is not outweighed by the public benefit of this. So I therefore very much support the officer's recommendation to reviews, and I would like to propose that we support that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Penfold. I'm going to just park that for a moment. Okay, keep that on the table. See if there's any other speakers here, please. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Proposals come in a bit quicker than I was expecting. Well, the officer's very good presentation, and there didn't have really many questions around the aspects surrounding the presentation. Nevertheless, with your indulgence, I would like to ask a series of questions concerning the report that's in the agenda, and to drill down into that, please, for some more information. If I have your indulgence, thank you. So the first question would be, in terms of the Millennium Way and the Macmillan Way and the right of way that we know surrounding planning law, that we cannot do anything that is detrimental to the user of that right of way and their enjoyment of the landscape and the views and such like. Is there a possibility to actually, rather than planting the hedgerow and giving it that tunnelling effect, to actually put a ditch and bank in there and rural fencing? Is that an option that officers would be able to go back to the applicant with?
If I can just respond for a second. I mean, that's not what's on the table in front of us at the moment. That would constitute, another application, really. If that, well, I think we heard what you said, but
I wonder, Chairman, what I should have said, whether or not it could be put in as a condition.
Is it possible we could condition that?
Chair, it is possible that we could condition not to pursue the hedgerow shown on the plans, but to pursue an alternative to be agreed with officers that could include a ditch and fencing, as stated by Councillor Bartlett.
Does that answer your question to a better degree, Shane?
It does, Chairman, yes, thank you. Shall I continue? Thank you. On page 22 at 14.15, and I won't read the entire paragraph out as members will have read it, but I've got a concern that in the there was no evidential report that came forward to justify that this AONB needs to take this solar farm due to there being no other site within the proximity. Subject to that is, if this application is refused or deferred, is it the officer's view that the report could or would be brought forward to this committee at some future date? Because that I think is an intrinsic problem about this site, that report, to give the evidence weight that there is a need for this solar farm in the area, there isn't anything within the close proximity outside the OMB that would accompany it. The report hasn't come forward.
That might be one for legal to answer. Just to summarise, in case you missed any of that, Phil, was that is there a possibility that we could defer the meeting? And this is not a proposal; it's a question for the applicant to further evidence the reason why they can't place the solar farm elsewhere. There are other sites that have been identified, but not viable, we're told, but no reason why they're not viable.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, if members felt they didn't have sufficient information to determine the application, then then it is within members' discretion to defer the application and invite that additional information to be provided. I think the question you'd need to ask yourself was, whether the planning office, case officer could answer, is was the applicant given the opportunity to provide that as part of the application, and therefore, even if you were minded to defer, would that actually serve a useful purpose? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Phil. Yes, Anna, you wanted to have a word on that?
Do you want me just to respond to Phil's point there? Yes, Emma made the applicant aware of her recommendation some months ago, in fact, because there then cropped up an issue in National Highways, hence why it hasn't been brought to committee sooner. That all got resolved, and hence it's here today. But during that period, the applicant was asked about submitting a report to look at potentially other available sites. A report was submitted, but it basically looked at it in the context of best and most versatile agricultural land, and within a very small search area, effectively, or within the AONB, within, I think it was a matter of sort of about 5 kilometres of the site from memory. And it didn't look more extensively across the Dorset Council area at other potential grid connection points. I know there are potentially other points of connection because we have other applications before us currently as officers for solar farms. And one assumes if they've made an application, there is potentially the grid connection in those kind of locations as well. So they were given the opportunity, but only very limited information was submitted in response.
Yes, Shane.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, the officer, for the answer. I think it's important within a public meeting to get this sort of information out that's behind the report, so that in a public meeting we've got full knowledge of it all. My final question is around the Maiden Newton area that we're told has insufficient grid capacity. Do the officers have a little bit more detail on that? I mean, just how critical is the grid capacity within that area?
Anna, one for you to respond to.
I don't, Chair, because that's the kind of information they didn't come back and tell us. They didn't tell us what other sites they looked at, essentially, and why a connection could not be made elsewhere.
Shane, is that the limit of your questions now?
It is, thank you, Chairman. And I would like to come back to respond to the proposal and seconder when you get one. Thank you.
Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to be a lone voice here, but nevertheless, I shall go with it. I think the problem I have with these sorts of decisions is, for me, so much of them is subjective. We asked to refuse it because of the impact upon character, landscape, visual quality. To be honest, in my perspective at least, visiting this morning, I thought the impact was negligible. We're asked to refuse it because it fails to meet the test for a major development. I noticed that the footnote to paragraph 177 says that whether a proposal is major development is a matter for the decision maker. Again, it's a very subjective view as to whether it's a major impact. I think, on balance, my own personal view, I would side with the parish council and support this application. But I accept I'm going to probably be a lone voice.
Councillor Bolwell, knee barrow.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Not a round barrow, I hope. I'm generally in favour of solar panels, as people know, but not everywhere. And as most of Dorset is AONB, then it's a question of balance, I think. I take the point the parish council approve, which does have weight with me. Also, there's no harm to the heritage assets. That's been stated by our planning officer. The Macmillan Way, I see that we're trying to mitigate the damage to it via planting, but I'm not convinced that's actually going to solve the issue, as Councillor Bartlett said earlier. And against this is there are no compelling circumstances, and in the, and this great harm to the ONB has been demonstrated, I think. Although I tend to agree with Councillor Clayton that standing there today, I did struggle to see what the great harm was. But listening to the AONB people, in this case, I'm sitting on the fence. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Shane, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, after we had the site visit this morning, and I have great sympathy for Councillor Clayton's view. I do. These things are very subjective. It's down to an individual's view often on it, and within your own mind, determine that weight and that balance within your own mind as to whether the site is acceptable or not. I have a tendency to feel, and I'm not saying this is how I would think about all future sites, but there is a tendency that I feel, and I think public feel, that when you see a solar panel farm that's in more of a valley setting from a distance, they have a tendency to look like a body of water. And my concern with this one is the positioning of it on a hill slope, which I think would bring about damage to the surrounding landscape. I think it would be detrimental to that view and to that AONB. I'm disappointed that there wasn't, and it was good to hear the officer's background information, like that report I talked about earlier about given the absolute need for this solar farm to be there, and you know, making it an argument that could be supported. That report isn't present and hasn't come forward, which is disappointing. Therefore, it makes it difficult to support the application that's on the table. And in terms of the right-of-way path, I've done enough of those in the past, as you have, Chairman, to know that the one thing we can't do is to bring about any damage to a right-of-way that the user of it would have a lesser experience in using that right-of-way path. That's within planning law, that's there. We have to follow that guidance. So thanks to the members for the debate and for the questions and for the officers answering the questions. And I'm on the view, Chairman, that I can't support the application. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any more speakers? Councillor Brenton, then Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you, Chair. Is that working? I've got two sides on this one. I was concerned about starting with when we were on the site visit, my instinct is that although the site is on the sort of the edge of the brow of the hill, not on the top, you're looking at it sideways on. If it was a large agricultural development with 3 big barns, it would be far more imposing, far more detrimental, and there'd be nothing we could do about that because it's an agricultural building. I tend to think of things as being crops in fields. If this was a bright yellow field of rape, it would be more disturbing to the eye than grey solar panels. The difference is, of course, the solar panels could be there for up to 40 years. My instinct is that it would not really spoil the view of the AONB. What I was more concerned about was things like the fittings, the extra pylons, extra piles to get to connect up the electricity gained to the grid. So I am leaning towards, at the moment, being happy with the application. What I am not happy with is the idea of fencing and hedging the Macmillan Way. I think walking along a tunnel of high hedges, even if it might not be for 5 years, is much more detrimental, and I would have been interested if Councillor Bartlett's idea of basically ditch and fence would give you a much more feeling of open hillside, which is, after all, why we walk the hillsides. So at the moment, I'm half in favour, half against, just to let you know where I stand.
So you're sitting on the fence that hasn't yet been ditched, basically, is what you're saying. Before I bring Councillor Dunseith in, Phil Crowther would like to respond to a point that Councillor Bartlett raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make it clear to members that when you're looking at a planning application, in terms of the impact on a right-of-way, there's no legal requirement that the outlook, for want of a better term, has to be preserved or you have to refuse. You absolutely should be taking into account the impacts of the development on the rights of way, but there's no planning law, in inverted commas, that requires you to not accept any harm. And indeed, as a parallel, were you considering a diversion of a right of way, then it is one of the factors that you must take into account. But in a planning sense, yes, you should take it into account, but no, there's no legal prohibition on granting consent for any adverse impact. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Happy with that response?
Yes, Chairman, I knew what I meant in my head. It probably didn't come out my mouth in the same way. Thank you. And ever grateful to Mr. Cradle. Thank you.
I know you well enough, Shane, for that. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm in the process of agreeing with Councillor Clayton that when we stood there this morning and looked, from our vantage point, it looked quite a small area. I know it's not a small area, but from where we were and what we could see, and I didn't think that it would destroy the AONB. It may not be the best thing to happen to it, but weighing it up, I didn't think that it would destroy it completely. Also, the Millennium Way goes, I believe, I've learned that it's in the region of 200 miles long, and the area that we are talking about that would be a disturbed view is about 3/4 of a mile. So putting that into context, I also think about our energy self-sufficiency, and we do need more. We don't know what's coming next. And because this area, I will accept it is raised and it can be seen. It's not in a valley, it's not on top of a ridge or anything. So that does have a somewhat detrimental effect. But I think overall, I would be in favour of it. It's not perfect, but I'm giving weight to our ecological and environmental that we have taken as a council, but we also have to give weight to having our energy, creating our electricity and doing it in the best way that we can. So I think I will be accepting this proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I don't see any more speakers. Yeah, Councillor Barwell, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I keep going back to what Councillor Bartlett said and the planning officer that there are other sites that could be used locally, and I don't feel from listening to the planning officer that there's been sufficient efforts made by the applicant in that direction. And that's the one thing that's going to probably make me vote in favour of refusal. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Jespersen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The point about planning, and that's why we sit on the planning committee, is yes, it is subjective, and it is the planning balance. And that's, I think, what we're being asked to consider today. And this is a very fine balance, isn't it? Because we're all terribly aware of the need for sustainable sources of electricity. We've never been more aware of it than we are these recent months. But we also need to be aware of our responsibility to look after our AONB. Because if we don't look after it and we allow it to be chipped away, it's gone forever. And so in proposing that we support the officer's recommendation to refuse, I'm very aware of this balance, and it seems to me that all things considered, I'm coming down on the side of protecting the AONB and protecting the Macmillan Way. And I have to say, I'm not very convinced by this idea that we're only going to be ruining a small bit of the Macmillan Way. It's our bit of the Macmillan Way, and it's our responsibility to look after it. Never, everybody else can look after their 200 miles worth. This bit's ours, and we should look after it. But I think I would come down on the side with the officers, principally because it seems to me that there's no overriding need for this development to be in this location. That we have not had any evidence of an overriding need, and what we do know is that there are other locations nearby where they have managed to put solar arrays in discreetly without ruining the AONB, and that to me is the clincher, that it doesn't need to be in these two fields. So that's why I'm supporting officers. Thank you.
Well said. Okay, thank you. Councillor Dyer?
I don't need to say a lot, but I'm conscious of the fact that I'm the only councillor that hasn't spoken so far, I believe. But I simply find the arguments for refusal the more compelling, not the least because there must be more appropriate sites than this one. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Well, I haven't got any more speakers. We've got a proposal on the table from Councillor Jesperson, seconded by Councillor Penfold, to support the recommendation. Before I go to the vote, I think picking up what Councillor Jesperson said just now, and certainly in response to what Councillor Dunseith has said, yes, it is a very, very difficult decision, this, because we are, as individuals now as well, conscious of the energy issue facing us, not just in Dorset, but worldwide, really, and the need to provide renewables. But at the same time, we have to consider that Dorset actually has done extremely well in the renewable stakes, particularly with solar farms. If you look at the history over the last few years particularly, we've agreed and allowed quite a large number of these. So it's not as if we are lagging behind in providing that. And I think if there is a case in this instance, it's been queried about the location, I don't think members are anti a solar farm. That's the point. I think it's it is the location which is the biggest issue here with it, because as a county, we're very encouraging of this type of energy production, and it's worked well for us if you look back at the last few years' history particularly. But I do take your point, Councillor Dunseith, and I'm sure everybody in the room would. Yes, we have a commitment both ways, but we're also, as councillors, we're also custodians of our Dorset countryside. It's our term here, however long or short it is, it's our job to make sure that, together with everything else, is protected in the best way we think possible, so that it also comes into the mix. So, but certainly I think the comments made around here are most important, they're most relevant to where we are at this point of the 21st century. So it's very good, so thank you for that. Now, I'm going to move to the vote, and before I do so, I'm going to vote on this as well, right? And we'll do the vote as usual by a show of hands. And so when you're ready, just remind you that we've got a proposal by Councillor Jesperson, seconded by Councillor Penfold, to accept the recommendation as shown. Was there an amendment on an environmental policy, I believe, on the end of one as a typo? Which I made a note of.
It was to carry forward I think it was to add EMV 10 as in the reason for refusal, which was set out in the summary at the start.
It is set out.
Omitted from the recommendation, so with that as an amendment.
We need to have that added in as an amendment, that it's in contrary to EMV 10.
You need to check with Sherry.
Yeah. Are you happy with that, proposer and seconder?
Happy to propose as amended, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. Yep, thank you very much. So all those in favour of the recommendation to refuse the application for the reasons given, together with the amendment, please. Those against? Any abstentions? That is carried then. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, members, for the debate on that one. Very thorough. Moving on, item 6, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Exempt business. We don't have any exempt business either this time round. So on that note, thank you to all members and officers indeed as well. At 3:10, I close the meeting. Thank you very much.